Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Jaron Ennis versus Uisma Lima fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content and I will try my best to get it out there for you guys. There is actually a prediction which is also a fight from this card, which has just been requested on the Patreon and actually has just been released, being the Guido Vianello versus Alexis Barriere fight. So if you want to watch that, that's now live on YouTube, but that's come from the Patreon. So like I say, you can request any kind of video like that and I will try my best to do it. And the link will be in the description. Thank you very much for all the support I've had with that so far. Let's get straight into this one though, and this is Jaron Ennis moving up into now the super welterweight division, and he is having what is a bit of a tune-up fight against Uisma Lima, but at the same time it seems like maybe it was a tune-up fight in which they didn't really want, and when I say they, I mean kind of Matchroom and the management team of Jaron Ennis. It seemed like they were trying to get any kind of big fight, and yet again they've fallen short with Jaron Ennis. I mean, there's been multiple occasions now in which we've seemed to be very close to have a relatively big fight with Jaron Ennis, and then something falls through. I think last time it was, Teofimo Lopez, and I mean, Eddie Hearn listed off most of the super welterweight top contenders. I'm not going to go through them all, but there did seem to be at least, 10 of the top contenders in which didn't really want the fight against Jaron Ennis. And to be fair, I don't really blame them. Of course, you always want to see the best versus the best. And as a fan, this fight is not really exciting to see, in my opinion. And I don't think any of the, you know, fight fans in general are really that excited to see this fight. But at the same time, like I say, I don't blame the contenders for not wanting to give a non-world champion in Jaron Ennis an opportunity, because they know how skilled of a fighter he is, and they know that he's got a good fan base and a big-ish name, and that name's only going to get bigger, and he needs that world title to really give at least an incentive to one of the highly ranked contenders to give up their contendership position to fight for a world title, to make it worthy and make it worthwhile. And so I have a feeling that Ennis is going to have this fight against Uisma Lima and then go down the route of becoming, or attempting to become, world champion, because I think there are a few fights in the super welterweight division in which perhaps are there for the taking in the way of the world champions at the moment. Again, they're all top names, but I think there is some good fights in which Ennis can definitely have, good fights with, and you would perhaps on paper favour Ennis against, some of the other champions, which I'll speak about, come the end of the video. But like I say, this is a fight which is branded as a tune-up fight for Ennis, and at the same time, you say it's a tune-up fight with him coming up in weight, but of course, the former guy in which he was kind of rumoured to fight was Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford has moved up into the super middleweight division to fight Canelo. He didn't need a tune-up fight. He had, much longer out the ring than what Ennis had, and like I say, he did not need a tune-up fight and put on an amazing performance. I know Crawford is basically one of a kind, but still, at the same time, again, another reason why I don't feel like the fans are really tremendously excited for this fight is because, does he need a tune-up fight to move up move up one weight division when he is, fighting as good as he is, and he has been fighting, quite a few tune-up fights throughout his career. Obviously his last fight was probably the biggest fight of his career, but like I say, did he really need this fight? Of course, like I mentioned, Ennis is coming off the biggest win of his career, becoming a unified champion in the welterweight division against Stanionis, stopping the former champion. And like I say, this was a big moment for Ennis to be able to beat a champion. Stanionis wasn't one of the biggest names in the way of a champion, but he was definitely an underrated fighter and has gone on to be able to get a stoppage win since then. And yeah, he was a good name to have on the resume. But when Ennis is 33-0 and as big of a name as he is, when you look at his record and resume, the names really aren't kind of living up to the hype in which Ennis has. And so, again, is that his fault? Is that not his fault? It's difficult to say, but nonetheless, we want to see Ennis really kick on and really push on after this fight, because it is about time, realistically. Will Ennis have shown any improvements from working with Canelo? Is another little talking point, I suppose, that could be, linked with this fight. Of course, Canelo went on to lose against Crawford, and Uisma Lima has said that Canelo kind of taught Ennis how to lose, which of course won't be the case, but is a little bit of firing, back, I suppose, at him and saying that, Lima's not somebody who's going to just be a pushover. But, at the same time, I'm sure learning with Canelo and sparring with him and training with him, he probably would have learnt a bit. So I would like to see, what Ennis has learned. I don't know tremendously if that will help his defense or not, fighting with and training with Canelo, but maybe he might have learned a few kind of tricks of the trade, I suppose, to an extent. Lima, himself, he's kind of got on paper a bit of a bad, rep from fans. Of course, everybody will just look at the fight against Aaron McKenna and kind of judge him off that. But, that was him coming in on 4 days' notice in a weight division in which he doesn't normally fight in a country, of course, which isn't his own, and, still putting up a tough contest against Aaron McKenna, who is, one of the best fighters in the middleweight division. So that loss, I don't think, is a realistically that bad of a loss. Since coming into the super welterweight division, he's been able to have an IBO belt, defend an IBO belt, and also, whilst doing that, he's fighting all over the place and, defending his own belt in different people's kind of back gardens and home countries. To gain that of what is a good world ranking in which he has. This is, of course, the biggest opportunity of his career, and like I mentioned, everybody has kind of just looked at that Aaron McKenna fight and kind of judged him off that. But like I say, he's been able to go out there and get some good wins against, good fighters. I think the Singh fight was a good win for him. And last time out, he fought a South African fighter, in which was, quite a good win for him as well. In that fight against Koopman, I actually thought he would have lost, but he didn't, and he proved me wrong, and he actually was able to go out there and get a stoppage win as well. So again, that was a good look for him. But he definitely is riding a bit of momentum and a bit of a high, so I think he's definitely going to be coming into this fight confident. And at the same time, he's also definitely is a true super welterweight. I mean, he's a big guy. Of course, he's been able to fight up at middleweight, and like I say, he is going to be a big physical presence in this fight, in which Ennis is going to have to be wary of. But I would say perhaps he does fight relatively similarly to the ways in which, fellow past opponents of Ennis has fought, and of course Ennis has been able to get through that. To speak about both fighters individually, we'll start off with Ennis. He's, got that high kind of fight IQ, especially offensive fight IQ. He can fight on the front foot or the back foot and, look confident and composed and, be able to make good openings, work the openings, even in, tough positions that you might get put in. He changes levels very well. I think he's got great body work and he's really able to soften you to the body and then beat you down to the body. And that was how he was able to have so much success against Stanionis, who of course was trying to set a tempo, but Ennis was really chopping him down to the body, and in the end, that was far too much for Stanionis to deal with. He's a sharp, accurate fighter, and at his best, who's got snapping power. Again, will the power be able to carry up in the through the divisions? That would be interesting to see. I don't feel like he's got that one punch knockout power, but I think, like I say, there is always a bit of a snap with every kind of punch in which he's throwing, and the fact that they're so accurate and sharp with so much speed, again, is what can catch opponents off guard, and just a continuous barrage of combinations can really hurt opponents. But again, will that power be able to hurt or damage somebody who, like I say, is more of a typical super welterweight? He changes his level of power when he's throwing. He gets his range down early on. I think he does have good range management. He holds his shape well, unlike Lima. He can fight at in close or at a mid range. He pairs up his shots nicely, well, very nicely. The way that you can double, triple up his jab is very nice on the eye. He's got a great shot variation, very good hand speed. He's able to rise to the occasion. I think that is becoming, a bit more evident. Of course, like I say, he's only had that one kind of major big fight against Stanionis, and before that, he had a fight against Chukadzian, which really wasn't his best performance, and that was against Chukadzian, in which you could tell that he didn't really want to fight again. It was a fight in which I'm sure didn't really get him that excited, and it was a fight in which just was a bit of a keep busy type of fight, and to, I suppose, right the wrong of what was the first fight, where perhaps it was a little bit of a close fight, but nonetheless, that wasn't the best of performance for Ennis. But like I say, moving into the fight against Stanionis, that was, in my opinion, his best performance I've seen from him so far. And so, like I said, I think he will start to rise to the occasion. But again, will this fight really create enough hype and excitement for him to not start being kind of overconfident or cocky to an extent? And again, we will have to wait and see. He circles out of the corner well. He's got a consistent work rate. He's got comfortable combinations. He can fight at any pace. He works openings well, and he knows when to change gears as well. Negatives about him, I think, the main criticism, which has always kind of been the problem with Jaron Ennis, is just the fact that he gets caught too often. He can be too relaxed. He can admire his work. He can wait in range. He can drop his guard, not bring his shots back to his head, and just get lazy as a whole. I think he's definitely more willing to invite pressure than that of Lima, and I think that's going to lead into Lima's game plan. But again, will Lima be able to assert his authority enough, and will Lima catch, Ennis with something which may, rock him a little bit, or make him wary? Of course, like I say, again, moving up in weight, he can sometimes, put himself in bad positions, Ennis, just because of, the confidence in which he's coming with. He isn't always able to avoid the more predictable kind of loaded up shots, and that was the main kind of shots in which Stanionis was able to have success with. There was every so often where he was loading up on a shot, and it was a powerful shot, and it was just landing, and it's a shot in which he of his level and his ability, should be able to see coming and should be able to avoid. He does have good head movement when he wants to use it, but he does, forget to utilize his head movement a bit at times, and again, that's what can get him caught. He can force the fight a bit as well. He can be caught with straights, and he can be timed himself. And again, as a whole, I think his physicality is worse than that of Lima's, who, like I say, is, in my opinion, a physical fighter. But to speak more about Uisma Lima, he's a come forward fighter who does have kind of non-stop pressure. If you see any of his fights, he will be trying to keep that kind of pressure on. He's going to be very difficult to get off, and he does have that aggressive kind of mindset. He makes you fighters fight, which is what he's been able to do to most of his opponents in which he's been in there. Of course, McKenna was able to stay disciplined well, but against somebody like Ennis, how well disciplined will Ennis be for this fight? He has a great kind of level of heart, if that makes sense. He's just got a great, heart, I suppose, which might sound silly, but he is just going to be continuously taking shots and just walking through them and just continually coming forwards. He pretty much throws every shot with intent. Like I say, he does carry power himself, and that kind of level of power is just maintained throughout the entirety of the fight. Even when he does get tired a bit, he will still be throwing with everything into his shots. He's bullish, imposing, and strong. He can fight at a mid-range or in the pocket, but I think for the most part he wants to be fighting in the pocket. He's hard to get off. He can fight in the clinch and coming out of the clinch well. So again, that might be something in which, if Ennis is not bringing back his shots and, is willing to fight in close, he could get caught with shots from Lima. He punches all over, head to body nicely. He can move you around the ring. And of course, like I say, he carries a good level of power. Negatives about him, I think he doesn't really take much of a backward step at all, really. I mean, he's more willing to just take a shot and try and walk through it than to actually take a backward step, which again, there's plenty of defensive vulnerabilities in which you can kind of see in Lima's game, which I'm surprised just hasn't really been capitalized upon anymore. He's flat-footed, he walks onto shots, he has the lesser speed and accuracy, he stands tall, he's got pretty much no head movement and is often, squared up and can be kind of caught when he is squared up, and, he is just so flat-footed that it looks like it hurts a lot more. He can be made to overreach, he can be made to follow, he leaves gaps, he can stay on the ropes. If he does get put on the ropes himself, he's always going to try and fight out of bad spots and bad positions instead of, circling off, trying to even spin you or anything like that. He's just always trying to fight out of these bad spots. He can bring his back foot off the ground when he's throwing big, which again can kind of lead to, if that shot gets slipped, he then is just kind of flinging himself in off balance. He can forget his jab, which I think is a powerful weapon in which he has. Good straight shots with, like I say, good level of power behind both of them, but he does just forget them quite a bit. He can lean in on the front foot, and I do feel like he does take a lot of kind of clean shots, especially to the head. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Jaron Ennis is going to be able to win, and I think he's going to be able to win via TKO. But I am going to go with a late TKO, a TKO in round 10. I was tempted to go with a unanimous decision for this one, but I think Ennis is going to be able to kind of work him down and slow him down to the body and then be able to have his own way with things. He should, realistically be able to completely outbox Lima here and be able to put on a discipline showing where he can be the sharper, quicker, faster fighter who can make Lima look silly at times. But again, it's just how defensively smart and switched on Ennis is going to be for this fight. Again, this is a step down in opponent. Is he going to be overly confident? Is he going to be too relaxed? Again, all these things in which we've seen from Ennis before. Will all these bad habits creep back in again, or will he become more drilled? Of course, if he's been working with the likes of a Canelo, then we should see these things coming through. We should see him, being smart, being disciplined, knowing not to switch off in these bad positions. But again, we will have to wait and see. And this, of course, is for the WBA Interim World Super Welterweight Championship. So if he is to win this, then he could go on to fight the WBA champion at the moment, which is Abbas Barriou. And so that could be, perhaps an easy way to get a world title for Jaron Ennis. And yes, that probably, again, isn't really a fight in which I'm sure fans would be too excited for. But nonetheless, like I say, that would be a way to get him a world title, which it wouldn't surprise me if they actually end up going down that route. If not, I mean, if His Excellency wants to step in and get involved, then Ortiz versus Lubin, that fight's happening soon, and Eddie Hearn has said that Jaron Ennis is basically already signed to fight with Ortiz, so if Ortiz is able to get through Lubin, which is definitely a tough task, then that could be a fight there to be made, which could be a good Riyadh season, fight on a big card. But again, I think it is about time that realistically His Excellency gets involved with Jaron Ennis's career, because he needs to get moving that bit more, and it's clear and obvious that with just Matchroom's kind of push alone, it's not happening. So again, I think if we want to see these big fights, then that should happen with His Excellency. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.